In 480 BC, the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever witnessed crossed into Greece. At its head was a king who believed resistance to his empire was an insult to the divine, and he intended to crush the very idea of Greek freedom. But his path narrowed to a single mountain pass called the Hot Gates. There, a small coalition of Greek warriors took their stand, led by 300 Spartans, men trained from childhood to hold the line no matter the cost. Their stand at Thermopylae became more than history. It became a symbol of sacrifice against overwhelming power, of courage when defeat was certain. Yet behind the legend lies a real story. What actually happened in those 3 desperate days? And how did so few warriors alter the course of Western history? To really get Thermopylae, you have to understand the world it happened in. This wasn't some random fight. It was the explosive climax of decades of tension between 2 vastly different civilizations: the sprawling, centralized Persian Empire and the messy, fiercely independent city-states of Greece. On one side, you had the Achaemenid Empire of Persia, the biggest empire the world had ever seen. Under ambitious kings like Cyrus the Great and Darius I, it had expanded relentlessly, stretching all the way from India to Egypt. Persia was a world of god-kings and absolute authority, where all power flowed from one divine ruler. When the great king sent messengers demanding submission, he expected to get it. On the other side were the Hellenes, the Greeks. Greece wasn't a single country, but a collection of independent, often warring city-states. There was Athens, with its radical new idea of democracy and a powerful navy, Corinth, a rich trading hub, and of course, Sparta, a rigid, militaristic society totally unique in the ancient world. They all shared a language, religion, and culture, but they prized their freedom above everything else. The Persian idea that everyone, even nobles, was a slave to the king, that was just unthinkable to a Greek. The seeds of this war were planted a decade earlier. In 499 BC, the Greek cities in Ionia, on the coast of modern-day Turkey, revolted against Persian rule. Athens sent ships to help them out, an act the Persian king Darius I would neither forgive nor forget. So, in 490 BC, Darius launched his first invasion of Greece to punish Athens. He figured it would be an easy win. Instead, on the plains of Marathon, a smaller Athenian army of heavy infantry completely routed his forces. It was a stunning victory that sent shockwaves across the ancient world. Marathon was a deep humiliation for Persia. Darius planned a second, even bigger invasion, but died before he could launch it. That job fell to his son, Xerxes I. Xerxes was driven by a powerful mix of duty and ambition. He was going to avenge his father, erase the shame of Marathon, and finally bring the defiant Greeks to heel. He spent years meticulously planning, amassing a truly colossal invasion force. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, our main source for this story, claims Xerxes' army had over 2 million soldiers, while modern historians think that's a wild exaggeration, with logistical estimates putting the land army somewhere between 70,000 and 200,000 men. The psychological effect was the same. This was an army designed not just to conquer, but to overwhelm. It was a force meant to blot out the sun with its arrows and drink rivers dry. As Xerxes' grand army crossed the Hellespont, a strait separating Asia from Europe, on a remarkable bridge made of boats, and marched down into Greece, the Greek city-states faced a terrifying choice: submit or unite and fight for survival. Many northern cities, seeing the sheer size of the army, chose submission, but a core group, led by Athens and Sparta, formed a coalition called the Hellenic League. They would resist, but where could they possibly stop such a massive force? The answer lay in a brilliant, coordinated strategy. The Greek plan was twofold. The Athenian-led navy would try to block the Persian fleet at the narrow straits of Artemisium, while a land army would confront Xerxes' soldiers at an equally strategic choke point. They needed a place where Persia's numbers wouldn't matter, a place where a few could stand against many. They found that place at Thermopylae. The name Thermopylae means hot gates, a nod to the hot sulfur springs in the area. In 480 BC, this was no wide coastal plain. It was an incredibly narrow pass, just a sliver of land wedged between the steep, treacherous slopes of the Kalidromos Mountains and the sea of the Malian Gulf. Over the last 2,500 years, river sediment has pushed the coastline miles out. But back then, the pass was maybe only a few dozen yards wide at its narrowest point. This geography was the key to the whole Greek strategy. It was a natural fortress, a bottleneck that would force the massive Persian army to funnel itself into a tiny front. Here, their overwhelming numbers would be neutralized. Cavalry, a key Persian strength, would be severely limited. Huge formations of infantry would have to break apart and squeeze through, only to be met by a wall of Greek shields and spears. The commander chosen to lead this defense was the Spartan king, Leonidas. Sparta was the undisputed military powerhouse of Greece, a society where every male citizen was a professional soldier from birth. But Leonidas couldn't bring the whole Spartan army. The timing of the Persian invasion was a disaster for the Greeks. It coincided with two of their most sacred festivals, the Olympic Games, which required a sacred truce, and Sparta's own Carneia festival, during which warfare was forbidden. While it's tempting to think Xerxes planned this, it was more likely a coincidence that played right into his hands. Facing this religious roadblock, the Spartan elders compromised. They wouldn't send the main army, but they allowed Leonidas to march north with his personal bodyguard of 300 men. According to Herodotus, these weren't just any 300 Spartans. They were all veterans, and each had been chosen because he had a living son to carry on his family name, a grim sign that they didn't expect to come back. This is where we get the famous 300, but the legend often leaves out a critical fact. The Spartans were not alone. Far from it. The story of 300 men against 1,000,000 is a powerful myth, but the reality was a coalition. As Leonidas marched north, he was joined by contingents from other city-states. There were around 700 men from Thespia, 400 from Thebes, 1,000 from Phocis, and thousands more from across the region, including Helots, the state-owned serfs of Sparta. All told, the Greek force at Thermopylae numbered somewhere around 7,000 men. They were still catastrophically outnumbered, maybe by 20 to 1 or even more. But these 7,000 men were mostly hoplites, heavily armored infantry who were the masters of defensive warfare. A hoplite was a walking tank. He wore a bronze helmet, a solid bronze breastplate, and shin guards. His main defense was the hoplon, a large round shield of wood faced with bronze. For offense, he had the dory, a long, heavy spear, and for close-in fighting, a short sword called a cephas. Hoplites fought in a formation called the phalanx. They stood shoulder to shoulder, overlapping their shields to create a solid wall of bronze and wood. From behind this shield wall, they'd present a bristling hedge of spear points. In the tight confines of Thermopylae, a disciplined phalanx would be nearly impossible to break in a frontal assault. The Greeks even repaired an old wall that partially blocked the pass, making their position even stronger. Leonidas and his allied army had turned the hot gates into a death trap. Now, they just had to wait. When Xerxes and his grand army arrived at Thermopylae, he wasn't impressed. All he saw was a tiny, insignificant force blocking his path. confident they'd see how hopeless their situation was and just run away. He waited. For 4 days, the Persian army simply camped there, its sheer size a form of psychological warfare. Xerxes sent a scout to check on the Greeks, and the scout came back with a baffling report. The Spartans were outside their wall, calmly doing calisthenics and combing their long hair, seemingly unfazed by the ocean of Persian might before them. To the Persians, this looked like pure madness or arrogance. For the Spartans, it was a ritual, a normal preparation for a battle where they expected to risk their lives. Xerxes still couldn't believe their nerve. According to the historian Plutarch, he sent one last demand: surrender your arms. Leonidas's supposed reply has become the stuff of legend. Molon Labe, come and take them. Infuriated, on the 5th day, Xerxes ordered the attack. The battle for Thermopylae had begun. The first wave he sent in was made up of Medes and Sicilians. They charged into the pass, expecting to sweep the tiny Greek force away. Instead, they slammed into an immovable object, the Greek phalanx. The terrain worked exactly as Leonidas had hoped. Persia's numbers were useless. They were forced to attack the Greek line head-on, where the hoplites' better armor and longer spears made a brutal difference. The Persian soldiers, mostly carrying wicker shields and wearing cloth or leather armor, couldn't break the Greek shield wall. Their own spears were too short to even reach the hoplites, who methodically stabbed and killed from the safety of their formation. The Greeks inflicted horrible casualties while suffering very few themselves. Herodotus writes that Xerxes, watching from a nearby throne, leaped to his feet 3 times in fear for his army. To keep his front line fresh, Leonidas masterfully rotated his troops. The different Greek groups would fight for a while and then pull back, letting a fresh unit take over. This kept the wall of shields and spears solid and tireless. All day, wave after wave of Persian infantry was thrown into the pass, and wave after wave was bloodily thrown back. Frustrated, Xerxes decided to send in his best. He unleashed his personal guard, the 10,000 soldiers known as the Immortals. These were the most elite troops in the empire. They were called the Immortals because their number was always kept at exactly 10,000. Any man who was killed or fell ill was instantly replaced, creating the illusion of an eternal, unbeatable force. The Immortals charged in, expecting to succeed where the others had failed. They didn't. The Greek phalanx held, its long spears keeping the elite Persian warriors at bay. The Spartans, in particular, showed their legendary skill. Herodotus says they used a clever trick. They'd pretend to retreat, luring the Persians into a disorganized charge. Then, at the perfect moment, the Spartans would turn, reform their phalanx, and cut down the exposed and surprised enemy. As the sun set on the first day, the pass was choked with thousands of Persian dead. The Greeks had held their ground with minimal losses. They had proven that in this narrow corridor, they were the masters. Xerxes had thrown his best at them, and his best had failed. Day 1 was a stunning victory for Leonidas and his small army. The dawn of the second day found Xerxes in a grim mood. He'd expected to march through the pass easily. Instead, his army was battered and his elite immortals humiliated. He had completely underestimated the Greek hoplites and the genius of their position. Figuring the small Greek force must be exhausted from the day before, he ordered the assaults to resume. Once again, Persian infantry surged into the hot gates, and once again, they were met by the same impenetrable wall of shields and deadly forest of spears. It was a bloody repeat of the first day. The hoplites, fighting in the shade of the pass, methodically slaughtered the lightly armored Persian troops who were forced to attack them head-on. The ground grew slick with blood. The piles of bodies grew so high that new attackers had to climb over them, making them even more vulnerable. The Greeks continued their clever rotation system, ensuring the men on the front line were always fresh and their resolve was unshaken. The phalanx was a meat grinder, and the Persian army was the meat. By the end of the battle, Persian losses were catastrophic and utterly disproportionate to those of the Greeks, with Herodotus putting the total number of their dead at around 20,000. The psychological impact on the Persian army must have been devastating. They'd come to crush this small band of defiant men, but found themselves being systematically butchered instead. Xerxes was at a loss. His massive army was being held at bay by a few thousand men. Frontal assault was clearly not working. It seemed the hot gates were truly impregnable, and the Greek strategy had worked to perfection. As the second day ended, it must have seemed to Leonidas and his men that they might just hold out indefinitely, bleeding Xerxes' army dry until he gave up and went home. But their success was about to be undone, not by Persian strength, but by human weakness. As Xerxes sat in his camp, contemplating his disastrous failure, a local man named Ephialtes was brought before him. Motivated by the promise of a huge reward, he came with information that would change everything. Ephialtes told Xerxes of a secret path, a little-known shepherd's trail that wound through the mountains and came down behind the Greek position. The impregnable fortress of Thermopylae had a back door, and Ephialtes was about to show the Persians the way. The Anopeia Path. That was the name of the mountain track that would spell doom for Leonidas and his men. The thing is, Leonidas knew about it. The local Phocians in his army had told him about the trail. Recognizing this as his one major weakness, he had stationed their 1,000-strong contingent on the heights above the pass, with specific orders to guard it. They were his insurance policy. Xerxes immediately understood the value of this betrayal. Under the cover of darkness, he dispatched his commander, Hydarnes, leading the elite immortals who were thirsty for revenge, to follow Ephialtes up the mountain. They moved silently through the oak woods covering the mountainside. As dawn approached, Hydarnes and his men neared the summit where the Phocian guards were stationed. In the still morning air, the rustling of thousands of men moving through fallen leaves alerted the Phocians. They scrambled to arm themselves, shocked to find a massive Persian force suddenly upon them. But Hydarnes' goal wasn't to fight the Phocians. Fearing they might be Spartans, he had his archers fire a volley of arrows to pin them down. The Phocians, assuming they were the main target, fell back to a higher peak to make a stand. It was a fatal mistake. The Persians had no interest in them. Hydarnes and his immortals hurried right past and continued down the mountain, descending toward the rear of the main Greek army. Down in the pass, Leonidas got the terrible news. Scouts and runners, maybe even deserters from the Persian side, came with the word. The Phocian guard had failed. The Persians were coming. The trap was about to close. The Greeks were surrounded. Leonidas knew instantly what this meant. The battle was lost. To stay was to die. He quickly called a council of war. Opinions were split. Most commanders argued for a full-scale retreat to save the army to fight another day. This was Leonidas's moment. He could have retreated with his Spartans, and no one would have blamed him. The goal of delaying the Persian army had been met, but Leonidas chose to stay. Historians still debate why. Maybe he felt a Spartan king could never retreat. Maybe it was Spartan law, or an oracle that predicted a Spartan king must die to save Greece. Or perhaps it was a cold, calculated military decision. A rearguard had to hold the pass to protect the retreating army from being run down by Persian cavalry on open ground. Whatever his reasoning, Leonidas dismissed the bulk of the allied army, ordering them to retreat and save themselves. But he and his 300 Spartans would remain. They would make their last stand. They would not, however, die alone. In an incredible act of courage, the 700 soldiers from Thespia, led by their general Demophilus, refused to leave. They chose to stay and share the Spartans' fate. The 400 Thebans also remained, though Herodotus suggests Leonidas compelled them to stay, suspecting their city was secretly siding with the Persians. Along with the Spartans' Helot attendants, this left a final force of maybe 2,000 men to face the full, unconstrained might of the Persian Empire. As the rest of the Greek army fled south, this small, doomed force prepared for the end. Their mission wasn't to win anymore. It was to die, and in dying, to buy time for Greece and forge a legend that would inspire everyone who heard it. The sun rose on the third and final day. Xerxes waited, giving Hydarnes's encircling force time to get into position, then launched his main assault around mid-morning. This time, though, the Greeks didn't wait in the narrowest part of the pass. Knowing they were doomed, Leonidas and his remaining men advanced out into a wider section, determined to meet their end and take as many Persians with them as they could. What followed was a frenzy of violence. No longer fighting a purely defensive battle, the Spartans, Thespians, and their remaining allies charged, fighting with a furious, desperate courage. They crashed into the Persian front ranks, their spears stabbing, their shields smashing into faces. They were a whirlwind of bronze and iron, inflicting horrific casualties. In this final chaos, King Leonidas fell. A fierce battle erupted over his body. Herodotus claims the Greeks drove the Persians back 4 times to recover their fallen king, a testament to their ferocity, even as they were being overwhelmed. It was during this fight that 2 of Xerxes' own brothers were killed, but the Greeks' numbers were dwindling. As their spears shattered, they drew their short swords and fought on hand to hand. Then, the sound they had been dreading echoed from their rear, the arrival of Hydarnes and the Immortals. They were now completely surrounded. The few remaining Greeks, carrying Leonidas's body, fought their way back to a small hill. Here, they made their final, ultimate stand. It wasn't a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. They stood back to back, a tiny island of defiance in a sea of enemies. According to Herodotus, when their swords broke, they fought on with their bare hands and teeth. The Persian commanders, unwilling to lose any more men in close combat against these warriors, pulled their infantry back. They chose to finish the job from a distance. A signal was given, and the archers unleashed a storm of arrows. The sky went dark as thousands of shafts rained down, thudding into the last of the shields and bodies. One by one, the last heroes of Thermopylae fell, until no one was left. The 300 Spartans were gone. The 700 Thespians were gone. Leonidas was dead. According to Herodotus, the Theban contingent, seeing it was hopeless, had surrendered partway through the final fight and were taken prisoner, some of them branded as traitors. When it was over, Xerxes walked among the dead. He had lost thousands of his own men to this tiny band of Greeks. In a shocking break from Persian tradition, which usually honored a valiant foe, he ordered his soldiers to find Leonidas's body. He had the Spartan king's head cut off and impaled on a stake, and his body crucified. It was an act born of immense frustration. The Battle of Thermopylae was over. The Persians had won. The road to Athens was open. The Persian victory at Thermopylae was tactically absolute. The pass was taken, the Greek rearguard was wiped out, and Xerxes' army poured into central Greece. They would go on to capture and sack Athens after its people had been evacuated. From a purely military view, the stand was a defeat. But the Battle of Thermopylae was never really about winning. It was a strategic sacrifice. The The delay it caused had profound consequences. It bought precious time for the Greek city-states to rally and for the Athenians to escape. But more importantly, it had a huge impact on Greek morale. The story of the incredible courage at the Hot Gates spread like wildfire. It proved the mighty Persian army wasn't invincible. It showed they could be beaten, that they could be made to bleed. This heroic defeat became a powerful symbol of Greek unity and resolve, a rallying cry that stiffened their will to fight. The seeds of defiance planted at Thermopylae would bear fruit just about a month later. At the naval battle of Salamis, the Greek fleet lured the larger Persian navy into narrow straits and won a stunning, decisive victory. This forced Xerxes to retreat to Asia with much of his army. The following year, at the Battle of Plataea, the main, combined Greek army, including a full Spartan force, finally crushed what was left of the Persian invasion, ending it for good. Without the delay, and more importantly, without the inspiration of Thermopylae, those later victories might never have happened. The last stand of Leonidas and his men wasn't the end of the story, but the heroic prologue to Greece's ultimate triumph. Today, nearly 2,500 years later, the legend of Thermopylae endures as a timeless symbol of courage against overwhelming odds, of sacrifice for freedom, and of the power of a few to stand against the many. A monument stands at the site today, bearing an epitaph from the poet Simonides. It reads, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." It's a simple, solemn tribute to the men who, in defeat, secured an immortal victory, and whose sacrifice has become one of the foundational stories of Western civilization.